Welcome to the CG Pro podcast. This is episode 46, and here with us today, we have two very special guests from Pixomondo. We have Asad Manzoor and Zach Dembinski. Welcome, guys. It's great to have you here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
You bet. Thanks for joining us. So we'll do introductions in a second. We are CG Pro. We're a school. If you enjoy today and you want to follow us, you can find us in our Facebook group and at becomecgpro.com. So here we are, Asad and Zach. Great to have you guys. So Asad and Zach both come from Pixomondo. They're both heavily involved in virtual production there. Asad is head of content creation for Pixomondo's virtual production division. He's worked on some very cool projects from Star Trek to Halo and Avatar: Last Airbender. Helped to develop Pixomondo's virtual production division. And Zach is also involved in virtual production at Pixomondo. He comes from decades of visual effects, brings all of that into the virtual production realm. You guys will do a much better job of introducing yourselves than I did, but welcome both of you.
Thank you
Thanks
so
so much.
You bet.
I suppose.
So-
Go ahead.
A little bit of
Yeah, you go
what I'm
first.
doing day to day these days, just kind of as head of content at Pixo. In Toronto, we're really kind of focused on the in-camera VFX aspect of virtual production over here. So kind of my focus is ensuring that our Unreal renders and the content that makes it to the wall is up to the photoreal quality that we're used to in VFX. That's a little bit of my day-to-day, kind of jumping in with a little bit of VAD supervision from time to time as well, when needed. But yeah, that's kind of what I've been up to. Zach?
Yeah, and
Zach.
Yep, just to piggy off Asad, I'm the VAD supervisor here at Pixomondo Toronto, and my day-to-day responsibilities are overseeing the environments that we're filming, maybe on a particular show or shows, and really carrying that through and overseeing it from the pre-visualization stage all the way to the final pixel stage on an LED volume, making sure that those workflows and stuff are we're all adhering to them, and working with Asad and talking with Asad a lot with developing workflows as well.
Amazing. Well, definitely very familiar world to me, having spent quite a bit of time in that space as well. So I'd love to ask you both, maybe one of you at a time, but I'd love to ask you both a little bit about how you got here. We're in a sort of young industry, if you like, well, an extension of industries that have been going for a while, production and visual effects, but virtual production, at least with a name, is relatively new. But how did you get into? Let's take Asad first. How did you get into the industry initially? What was there some inspiration you had when you were young that made you know you wanted to do it, or did you find it later? Did you do some education to be able to get into the industry?
Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, inspiration-wise, growing up, I think a lot of folks in VFX in general point to The Matrix when that first came out. Huge inspiration, and kind of once you see that, at least in my mind, that was a really big clue as to what I wanted to do, make things like that happen. Then it came over to schooling. Kind of in high school, I began getting into the 3D world a little bit with Blender. So around 2015, Blender 276, I think it was. And kind of the appeal there was that similar to those movies and The Matrix, after looking at all that, there was always a big question of how do you do that? I think a lot of us started with the kind of Andrew Kramer After Effects tutorials. Those were really popular kind of when I was coming into the industry. And then from there off to college, I actually went to a design program. So it was a bit of a meandering path on my side for sure. We covered quite a bit of graphic design and typography, but kind of I think no matter which program or kind of field of study you get into, it's going to in some way shape, or form feed into what you end up doing. And that's exactly what kind of happened in my case when it came to design composition. You still kind of use all of that. And from there, it was kind of a matter of just creating a series of snippets. I like to create a lot of GIFs back then during college.
Not GIFs.
GIFs. the age-old debate, right? But yeah, so I would post quite a few of those onto Reddit, and a few of those gained traction throughout that time. That ended up getting me connected to someone who was already in the industry, Yuri, thank you so much, who introduced me to a few folks at Pixo, and then the rest was history. So when it comes to virtual production specifically, you could say I was kind of, from industry speaking, born into it. Virtual production is my first step into kind of the visual effects industry, besides some freelance work prior to that. Yeah, kind of starting from scratch. It was Unreal from the get-go, first foot in the door with Pixo, when it's just a couple of people trying to build this fledgling R&D department. And that's how I got in.
Cool. Yeah, it still feels like virtual production is going to be an R&D department for a while as we figure it out. Yeah. So
Absolutely.
Some visual effects and freelancing that led into. Did you start with visual effects at Pixo or virtual production straight away?
Straight into virtual production. So it wasn't called virtual production at the time. At least we didn't call it that. It was just our Unreal/real-time department. It was just I would say 3 folks at the time, and kind of our focus then was just trying to get final pixel images out of Unreal, taking existing VFX shots that Pixo had done previously, redoing them in Unreal, and just kind of proof of concept, showcasing that to our financing departments, and continuing to get the department to grow that way. But yeah, from the get-go, it was virtual production on my side, with a little bit of assets on the side on occasion. But for the most part, it was just like grabbing a Kinect and trying to get like a motion mirror setup for Unreal, or kind of recreating shots, just look deving things and just seeing that, like, okay, is this even a thing that can work for Pixo? And from there, we kind of grew.
So initially it was R&D, not tied to production schedules. It was kind of given a little breathing room.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was luxurious in that sense, for sure.
Cool. Well, yeah, thanks for those insights into how do you feel like you're because I think a lot of our listeners, they vary. You know, people who've been in the industry for a while, people who have not entered the industry yet. It's really interesting for people to hear, I think, about the journey and about how you got here, what education had, what part education had to play in it, what part what do you feel like were the biggest contributing factors to getting you to this point?
Absolutely. I think a lot of it, and this is something that we look for in folks too when we're hiring, is personal projects. So if you're interested in doing personal projects on your own time, it just shows that you're very interested in the industry, and there's a tenacity with it that we like to see. And there's just a genuine passion that comes through in those personal projects. The nice thing with those is you have full control over them, and you can really dial them in and art direct, which is something that you might not have an opportunity to do in the context of a school with if you're given a brief beforehand, things like that. So something like personal projects where you can flex your creative muscle with full creative control and just have control over all the variables involved in that. It's a nice way to get quick quality work out into your reel. That said, I would also supplement it with a hypothetical brief, maybe, to just showcase that, you can cater your style or cater your work in a particular direction if you need to. But I think that combination of like a little bit of personal work and a little bit of like hypothetical brief work absolutely helps. And I think that's where school really comes in, is that's the catalyst for kind of getting you to create all that work, and being surrounded with like-minded people in school, folks that are interested in visual effects. It can be quite difficult at the beginning, especially kind of learning everything. It's overwhelming. So kind of being surrounded with people that are constantly in the same boat as you can really push you to get those two things squeezed into your reel as soon as possible.
Did your education lead
Mhm.
to having a reel like that in that sense?
I would say so. And at the beginning, like kind of in my program, for example, this was graphic design and typography. So in a lot of those projects, I would find that okay, I'm doing 3D stuff anyway, just because it's it's the tool that I'm using to get me to the goal that I'm trying to hit with this project. And in the act of kind of shoehorning the visual effects and 3D pipeline into that work, I think that solidified the idea in my head that, okay, this is what I want to do. Obviously, I'm squeezing it into every project that I'm doing in this program. So this is probably the route that I'm going to stick to. Haven't gotten bored of it. So keep on going. But yes, absolutely, education in that sense helped a lot. A, to figure out what it is you want to do in the first place, and B, to surround yourself with those people. Because at the end of the day, this program, for example, was still a creative program, and there's no shortage of people that would like to cross over into virtual production, VFX, that would take a general creative design program like that. So I think
Right.
in a lot of fields, you're going to find a lot of crossover there and find a lot of like-minded people. So no matter what the program is, really, school will in some way, shape, or form, in my mind at least, push you towards where you need to be. In this case, VFX and VP.
Right. Yeah. Definitely very biased about that now running a school, but it's
Right.
good to hear your
Absolutely.
journey thus far, because I know there's also a lot of people who are looking to make career transitions whilst they've been in visual effects for a while. And Zach, I'd love to ask you a little bit about your path as well. Where did it begin for you?
Oh, it began with Toy Story. I loved that movie when I was little, and just that animated film just, I don't know, it captivated me when I was young. Um, and then my sister's boyfriend and then husband later on in life um, introduced me to Lightwave 7.5C when I was about 14. He was taking a design class in college, and he had an animation course. And he's like, "Hey, check out this program." He's like, "Yeah, you can create anything you want." I'm like, "What do you mean anything I want? Like anything I have in my brain, I can create here in this software. I can get it out of here and put it digitally." Yeah. Showed me how to just do a rectangle, extrude some windows. He's like, "There you go. You have a building." And from there on, that's all I did. When I was 14, 15, all the way through high school, I just messed with Lightwave 7.5. I got into Maya, and I knew then that that was my path. I had already decided. So even by 16, I had already was already looking at schools to go to when I was like graduating high school. I was like, all right, let's get high school over with because I'm ready for the next step in my my path and my journey. So and then by 17, I ended up, talking with and doing like a little competition with Vancouver Film School, and actually placed placed in that competition, and actually got to fly out there to visit the school and meet the faculty and the other students that were a part of that, and that was awesome. And so I just decided there that, hey, I'm going to go to Vancouver Film School. um, so I turned 18, I left high school, and then 1 month later I was in Vancouver, and I was heading right into the deep. That's like a 1 year program, so it's very intensive. They encourage you. You can't work during this period because it's literally you got to sink all of your time in there. In the last 6 months, you're going to be doing your demo reel, and you're going to be working 16, 20 hours a day. sleeping in the lab like most of us did, to produce a demo reel. And that was a really awesome experience and a very intimidating experience too, because people coming into that school were not only new to the idea that they wanted to do this as a career, but there was also a lot of people from outside countries that were coming in, that had experience in their origin of where they were living before. But that was also a really unique experience because to people that didn't have any past experience, we were able to, collaborate with those and ask questions to those basically industry professionals just from other countries. And I feel like it just accelerated my knowledge like tenfold in that year, because it's like I had all these people that had the answers to my questions, and not only faculty, but really it was, the students and the friends that you were with, because you're with them 16 hours a day. They are your family during that year. And then yeah, then after that I graduated. It was 2012, and times were tough and slim. And I didn't make the cut right away of getting into the industry. It took me around 8 months to get in after I graduated school. So I had to do like other students or people right now that are going through. I had to work at Panera Bread as a night baker from 9 p.m. to 6 in the morning. And then I just literally crunched during that 8 months. As soon as I got home, I just kept on making content, just kept on making content. And finally, that stuck with a creative ad agency. And then before I knew it, 8 months later, I was creating alcohol brand bottles for like Diageo and Captain Morgan and Crown Royal and all these other brands. So I was in advertisement. That's kind of where I landed first. After a couple years in advertisement, I said, I still have that VFX itch. I really, I didn't get to explore it right out of school. So I left advertising and took the plunge, and that was in the States. And I came back up to Toronto and started a job here working on VFX. Kind of reset, shifted my mentality from glass and refractions to VFX and matching plates. And
In movies.
yeah, in movies, yeah,
Yep.
and TV series as well. A lot of
Right.
episodics, which were great too. I love episodics because they're very fast. They're in and out through the door, and it's not like an 8 or 12 month period where you're working on like the same shots for like months. You have
Like
something new weekly.
right. It's like the commercials of the film world
Oh
almost.
yeah,
You have tight
Oh, yeah.
tight turnaround times, not on something for too long, and you get a lot of variety
oh
doing
yeah.
that kind of work.
And when you do that variety of work, and I was at smaller studios, I also thought that was more beneficial than going right into a bigger studio, because it kind of developed my core skill sets to be more of a generalist when it was a smaller studio. So I had to touch a little bit of everything: modeling, animation, look dev, lighting. Um, and then when I moved to the bigger studios, I kind of, moved into my niche of more of lighting was my my area of expertise, I would say. And the rest I could do, but I wasn't an expert, I would say, at them, or um, enough to just get me by. And then yeah, then I had the rest of my career in VFX and jumping from studio to studio, animated films, TV series, feature films, and then I came to Pixomondo, and I was originally a lead lighter, and then a lighting supervisor, then the HOD of lighting, and then Asad and his small team took that plunge into Unreal and created this magnificent opportunity for the rest of us at Pixomondo to dive into this world of real-time engines and Unreal. And it was something that really interested me. I had done 10 years of VFX at that point. So this was something fresh, something new, something challenging. Wasn't just the norm. And the rest is history. Here we are, two years later.
Very cool. So yeah, so what was it? Just going all the way back to the
Yeah.
beginning of that, what was it about Toy Story that made you feel like you wanted to do it for a living, as opposed to just enjoying the movie?
It I think I had that mentality even then, that all of that was created. It's like those
Right.
classic Disney films that someone had to create that world, and then I think it blew me away more exponentially because it was dimensional. It was 3D. And then I was like, wow, this whole story is told with these dimensional characters. It's not flat 2D. Like it's different. I didn't feel like I needed to paint or I needed to know how to draw. It was
Right.
like this whole different medium, and that's what kind of captivated me when I was younger. That it was I would equate it to the dimensionality of it. I think that's what drew me in. I was like, whoa, that's what it made me feel like it was real.
And was there like a feeling that came along with that? Did it feel like really exciting and just it was pulling you
Oh yeah,
towards it?
it, that and then as I got older, and especially when I got introduced to the software from my brother-in-law to Lightwave, I wasn't the kid that went out and like was making a muck of town and getting into to
Trouble.
bad stuff or like just being a typical kid. I chose, if my friends were like, hey, you want to go hang out by the pod, or the not the pod, the pond, I'm like, nah, I think I'm just gonna stay here and create my scene. And I
Right.
was just like holed up in my computer all during high school, just creating content because it was fun. And then, of course, trying to get into After Effects and trying to composite stuff in and, doing the crappy lightning rays that you do in high school. And you think it's amazing. And you look back on it and go, my God, that was horrible.
But relative, all relative, right? To
Yes,
compared to
yes,
what you could
That's how you
do
know you're
last week.
growing.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, absolutely. And what was it about lighting that really appealed to you? What did you love about that?
It's the emotion and the feeling of the mood. I love just the mood that you can create. You can tell a story with lighting. Is it dark? Is it gloomy? Are you happy? Are you sad? Um, and a lot of that comes through lighting. And you can tell stories with the dramatics of how things are lit, underlit, side lit, top lit, backlit. Um, even going back to like working on personal stuff. Like Assad has seen some personal stuff I've worked on. Like I've told a story through shadows. Kind of a collage of shadowing um,
Like
characters
shadow
doing
puppets
kind of, yeah,
kind of
like
thing?
just shadowing of the scene happening, but told through shadows on a wall
Mm.
and of the scene happening. You can tell what's going on and you can feel that emotion, but that's still a part of lighting because without lights, there's no shadows, and um, and without lighting, you can't see anything too. That's also the thing that I love about is you have modeling and look dev and all these great effects, but um, they look like nothing unless if they're lit very, very well and they're reacting properly together as cohesive.
Right. That makes sense. So yeah, the lot of what this is about really is storytelling and feelings, and we're so often get caught up in the tools, I feel like, but you're going right back to the heart of what this is about, which is about making people feel something.
Yes,
And that's a
definitely.
powerful tool to do it.
Yes, I love when I watch something or I see a movie or visual effects. I have an emotional connection, and it's that deep sinking feeling in your chest because you're almost living that moment at that second, and you're like, "Whoa!"
So just to talk about something you brought up there, and I'm seeing the questions coming in here, and we will get to them. Some very specific questions about particular things in virtual production that we'll get to in a second. But something I was curious about that you mentioned is personal work. And whilst what I think a lot of us, in fact, I remember somebody at the beginning of my career telling me, "Don't get into this industry if you want to make your own stuff." And I thought that was really frustrating because that's exactly what I did want to do. Um, and I managed to prove them wrong since and made some of my own stuff. What are your thoughts on being able to balance making your own work or having your own kind of at work? A lot of the time you're making something to a very specific brief and it's cool, but it's still someone else's work. And what are your thoughts about your own passion, your own creativity, your own projects?
Yeah, I think it's just a great creative outlet for yourself. I've discussed this with Assad many times,
Hmm.
and work is work. You can work on cool projects, but um, it took me a while in maturity in my own career to realize that when you're working on something in this industry, you're working on someone else's vision, right? And you're creating their dream. And you have to be okay with that. And it's okay if the shot gets completely mangled in DI, or if they completely change it, you had it looking the best and you thought like this lighting and this atmosphere was awesome, and then they say, okay, it's nighttime now and it's barely lit and it's just rim lit, and they just completely ruin the mood, and you just have to let that go because that's someone else's vision and you're just creating that vision. And that's where I think personal work comes in, and that's your own creative outlet. That's your safe space, in my opinion, to flourish and pour out all of your ideas that you have cooped up in your brain, or that you feel that could have been better or more emotionally conveyed in any project that you've worked on in the past. Taking lessons from how did that go and how did that evoke emotion or didn't, and incorporate that into your own work. And then it allows you to grow because you're figuring things out. um, as you get in this industry, I find it's easy to go on autopilot in your career, because you're getting comfortable with just the tool sets, and you might not have to think as hard because the devs are helping you, or you have tools that are just you're just clicking buttons and things are happening. um, but when you're working on your own stuff, you don't have that tool set, and you go, well, how do I do this manually? You might have to take the long way. You don't have the short way if you don't have any scripting, or Python knowledge. And it allows you to explore a lot more different techniques. And I think that's easily transferable. It comes right back into your career because some things will come up and you'll be like, hey, on that personal project, I know a perfect technique that would work for this shot. And then you're able to present that and kind of explore in your own way. So you're taking those personal experiences and you're bringing them in. So I look at it as like a seesaw. Like it's going back and forth. It teeters back and forth. But it is very difficult, and even to this day, it's hard to find a balance, right? And there's some studios that you might work at that you might get burnt out, and that burnout point literally does not make you want to do personal stuff. You don't even want to
Yeah.
touch a computer at the end of the day. You don't even want to think about 3D. You just want to veg and you like TikTok all day, and that's it. That's your day.
Exactly.
And so it's about finding that balance and finding the right studio for you. And then with experience, you'll have that feeling and that seniority to understand
Hmm.
that balance in life.
And like on that burnout note too, I find that it prevents burnout in the first place. If you're kind of making that time and setting that boundary at work, that like, okay, I clock out at this time, I start my personal work over here. That's a really good time to recharge the creative energy there. And it may not feel like it either, like when you're in the thick of it, and like you're saying, you'd want to veg out. But even then, just pushing through that initial uh, kind of inclination, and then just starting with the personal work, just like, okay, I'll do a minute of it and then I'm out. And then before you know it, you've been at it for 30 minutes and you've kicked out some really cool stuff you can throw up on ArtStation. So at least in my mind too, in my case, it really helped prevent burnout in the first place in a lot of scenarios. Just kind of keeping uh, that thing that got you into the industry alive in the first place, and making sure that doesn't uh, kind of dwindle.
It keeps the passion alive.
Exactly.
Really helps with that. Yeah,
Exactly.
I definitely resonate with that, having tried to carve out bits of time during my career in the last 15 years or so of being able to find that spark and continue to find that spark. Occasionally having the luck of being in a spot where there's one job's finished and the next one hasn't started yet. If you're staff, sometimes you get moments at a studio to be able to work on that a little bit, work on some R&D, work on something of your own even.
Exactly. Yeah, those are the best in the ebbs and flows of the studio. Those ebbs, make use of those as much as we can, for sure.
Definitely.
Yeah,
But
that's.
yeah,
I think it's important. It's important to try and balance it because, as you've hinted at, this is a well-worn conversation in the visual effects world of talking about burnout and long hours and things like that. And I think a lot of people, there can be a lot of noise out there sometimes about that it's inhumane or people aren't treated well, and I know that can be the case sometimes, but being able to being very passionate about something makes longer hours a little easier to stomach, but
Definitely.
hopefully then you get some time afterwards to be able to slow down a little bit for just for a minute, be able to take a beat.
Exactly. That's one of the nice things about virtual production too, like that we're finding visual effects having been this kind of thing at the end that you're working on up until the air date or beyond. If the air date ends up being pushed, there's potential for so much crunch at the end there with like notes upon notes upon notes. And with, I mean, VP, you have a hard cutoff, at least with in-camera VFX. It's a shoot date. Once it's done, it's done. So it's a lot more similar to like a production in that sense, and I think that's been that really helps alleviate kind of the potential burnout you might face in the industry. That was really one of the appeals in the first place, at least for me, in kind of sticking to virtual production. Kind of early days was like this is a good chance for folks in the industry to kind of tweak the status quo a little bit, the kind of usual crunch that you are used to, and kind of altering that and making it a little more artist friendly. So that's the hope for sure.
And yeah, some of the other appeals that people talk about in virtual production, being able to be closer to the production, because in visual effects you're, as you said, way at the end getting, okay, this is what we've got, okay, that's what I'm going to finish off. And
Exactly.
in virtual production you're there at the beginning of a shot's life. Can you tell me a little bit about what that's like to be more connected with production as a visual effects person?
Absolutely. Yeah. We in my mind, in any project, not necessarily just visual effects, any thing that a group is working on, the more interconnected that group is, the better product you're going to end up with by the end. So it was the same case with visual effects and VP, really. VFX was so separate, so separate back in the day. And if you wouldn't have necessarily like a DP or director taking a look at your shots, depending on the production, of course, then a lot of it is just in the hands of the VFX company. There's a long feedback loop. And yeah, all that kind of just ends up being squashed if you're on a virtual production show. Of course, there are still hurdles to cross during those virtual production projects, but they are different hurdles for sure. What we're finding here too is on established virtual production shows for sure, like taking Star Trek, for example, where both the production and Pixo, like we kind of have a shorthand going and both teams are very interconnected at this point. The vendor, us, Pixo, we can come in as early as pre-script. So before the scripts are written, have the opportunity to talk to the art department about like, okay, what would be cool on the wall? How can we wrap this into the story? How can we make a tweak here or there to allow for this particular sequence to happen that we know is going to really shine on the wall? And it's cases that like that at least they're new to me in VP that we may not have had in VFX previously. So that's been super exciting for us.
Zach, do you feel the same? You feel like you have more kind of creative input in the process?
Definitely, most definitely. I mean, it's such a stark shift from traditional VFX where it's post is an afterthought almost. They filmed it, they shot it how they wanted it, and now you just have to deal with it in post. So they could go day for night on you and completely 180, whatever. There was, I feel like there was vision, but there's not a solid vision when it was just green screen. That was still up in the air at that point. And another thing too is most productions are moving on to other productions. Like once post happens, your DP and your directors are probably going to be on other shows or starting other shows, and then they are kind of their times are split, and you kind of you catch them in this weird time where they're there but they're not there too because they have other stuff going on or they're taking a break after their production wraps. And now you're seeing the shift with virtual production, as Asad has stated, is that we're working with the art department and the set designers and concept artists internally with our VAD concept team and their concept team, DPs and directors about what can we do that makes the most successful shoot and makes the most sense for the wall in the LED volume for their show? And you get this really cool aspect where everyone's making a decision in the beginning of what this is supposed to be. What is the mood and the story that we're trying to tell? And that's like locked in stone in the beginning, because that's what we're going to shoot. And the whole goal of this is in camera final, right? Final pixels. We shoot it and we do nothing. We send it to DI and it goes to air. And we're starting to see this shift too, where we're connected with the art department. And before, you'd have to match what's on set. And now we're kind of finding this weird, not weird shift, it's a good shift, where we're creating stuff in the VAD conceptualization stage. And the art department and set design is actually taking the models that Pixo creates and is 3D printing them and is making them for their practical set design. So now you're starting to see this opposite side of it, where we're providing stuff that they're making, and then it just brings this cohesiveness to the digital and practical set. And then that's part of the the whole thing too, is you want the viewer to see something practically and digitally, and them to marry the same assets and the same look. So there is no wall at that point. You're just saying, oh, a barrel and a barrel and a barrel and a barrel, and this ground is looking the same. And but that ground could have been created by the set design, the art department team first, or it could have been created by our VAD visualization team, and they're just mimicking it. So it's this cool shift that's going back and forth, and we kind of we trade ideas.
Yeah, there's that 50-50.
Yeah.
And it's so cool for artists too. Like whenever we do end up in those scenarios where Pixo creates an asset and then it's brought to life by the art department, you never have that in VFX. So the fact that, and like we'll often have artists come to the stage to help operate because they know their environments best, and just having them be able to see their prop that they worked on earlier just in real life, tangible, that they can actually touch. We'll try not to touch. It's tempting, but
look at least.
We'll look at it
Yeah.
very closely, and that's just kind of that extra little bit of this is my work. You have the fruits of your labor in front of you in real life, which is something really nice about coming in this early.
Can you tell us a little bit about the difference between a VAD, which some people might not even know what that is, and the art department? And I know that that's many flavors of that, and that it's an evolving concept as well, but at least where it's going.
Absolutely.
From your perspective.
Absolutely. So VAD being virtual art department, yes, it is similar to the art department, but virtual. A lot of the question at the beginning of this whole process in ICVFX for Pixo was, is this a replacement for the art department? And just to squash that right away, it's absolutely not. It's the practical set itself is created by the art department and it stays in their world. And Pixo is coming in this kind of gray area between visual effects and production design to create the rest of the set, but in the LED world. So that's kind of the separation at this point. At Pixo, our VAD, what we call VAD, encompasses all of content creation for a virtual production. So this is not necessarily just in-camera VFX. VAD would include concept art and kind of planning the set and kind of acting as a consultant for your traditional production art department to say that, okay, this is going to work for the wall, this will not, kind of steer you towards a direction which would make sense for the whole virtual production aspect of your production. So that's kind of where VAD comes in. It's an all-encompassing, almost all-encompassing term on our side for content creation within virtual production, and virtual production being the overall umbrella for any production that has anything to do with a game engine in any way, shape, or form.
Is there overlap between the two departments? So in the VAD, you've mentioned in concept art, which is traditionally an art department, kind of
Absolutely.
thing, but also in the art department, typically it being more concept and practical. But are you seeing art departments have 3D components where they're making things and
Absolutely.
passing them to you, and the same in reverse?
Absolutely. It happens all the time over here. So yes, the art department does even create some like early Unreal scenes for us and hand those off to us, and then from there we take it to the finish line. It's really scalable from production to production, is what we're finding. So if the art department on one production prefers to do all the concept art on their own, maybe we're just consulting and saying that and flagging things like, okay, this may not work, this will work, this may not work for the wall. And then the reverse of that is productions that choose to just have us take the reins from the get-go and kind of act as an art department, but for their VP shoot. So it's really been flexible. It scales from production to production based on what the art department's needs are. Like on Star Trek, for example, we're receiving quite a few Unreal scenes and taking those to the finish line from there. And the concept art, when we're mentioning that in VAD, it can also be internal concepts. So just the idea of taking your Unreal scene, screen capping it, and then kind of painting it over to give the team an overall direction based on what you were given from the traditional art department. And then from there, also handing that key art that we've created off to the traditional art department to say that, is this the right direction? Is this what you guys pictured? Should we continue with this internally? So that's the kind of back and forth between VAD and the traditional art department, especially from a concept art perspective. But yeah, it's been very diverse from production to production, what the needs will be for each, and then we kind of expand and contract based on that.
Zach, any thoughts on how to how to help the virtual art department and the art department glue together nicely and function well together?
I think just being cohesive and working together and being open is what we found what works most. And I think it's really uncomfortable when any one of our clients is doing virtual production for the first time, right?
Mhm.
It's new, it can be scary, and our jobs is to be there and support them and um, make them feel comfortable because it is a comfortable process as long as you don't fight the process, right? And I think once every production gets and like art department and set designers get one, or they get, if they're an episodic and they get a few shoots under their belt when they're first joining this, they start understanding the process and the flow between us and information exchange and all that. And people start getting comfortable and they start you build that trust. And that's what we're always trying to do here at Pixo, is to never break that trust, always build that trust that the we're always going to deliver, the wall's always going to run, you're always going to have a shoot. And as you prolong that through not only an episodic but a series, you'll start to find just this it's almost like, again, like Asada said, we just kind of gel in together. And sometimes I don't even feel like it's art department, set designer, and Pixomondo. It's almost like we're just all working together. It's that feeling that we're all working together, and you get to build these relationships with them as well, especially through many seasons, and they become, basically friends and, like, work buddies, and you guys can trust each other. They know when to take the reins, and we know when they know when they can give us the reins as well, and trust that that process is going to get done, and the finish line is going to be met. So um, really, it just comes down to experience and time. And then, of course, we always are internalizing here, what is the best ways that we can onboard new clients, make them feel comfortable. Can we provide them, workshops and stuff like that has been really beneficial to
Mhm.
really ease them into the whole process of how this is going to go. So they're not so much shell shocked in the situation where because we never know. Maybe the decision wasn't theirs to do virtual production, but it could have been a producer's or executive producer's decision that they wanted to do that, and it's just dropped on their laps. So we have to make sure that they're comfortable with the process. And um, so far, I mean, it's been wonderful with the clients that we've been working with, and as soon as we built that relationship with them.
Yeah. I think part of it also, like early on, was us having to establish a shared vocabulary between ourselves and the art department, coming from very different backgrounds. Like our VFX vocab is very different from their production vocab, and sometimes you'll have the same word that means different things from production to production. Hotspots, for example, we call those, like, I guess it's the equivalent of a load for an ICVFX setup. What's a two shot? What's a cowboy? What are these camera moves? Coming from VFX backgrounds of artists are driving the scene, and you're getting call outs from the DP to do a shot here and do a shot there in like rapid succession. Just making sure that we on the VFX side know the language that's going to be used from the art department side and on the production team. And then conversely from there, like Zach, you were saying, the learning curve, that they know our vocabulary for virtual production and VAD. So that's something we squashed early on in kind of our first few productions with VP.
Right. Yeah. Do you have any resources around that, like glossaries or those kinds of things that you give out, like understanding? We have a lot to learn from each other. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Like oftentimes we'll send out documents and PDFs just as guidelines for everybody. And the tricky part with that is it's constantly updating, right? It's such a new industry. Like granted, it's a combination of a number of older industries, but this kind of combination of all of them is quite new. So yeah, those documents are being constantly updated at Pixo. So like if we'll do one season previously, the next season, it's going to be a new set of documents that we have to share.
Yeah,
sure.
and
Even internally. Yeah, go ahead.
That goes with the engine too, because the engine's constantly updating. So as soon as the engine update comes out, there's this new feature, and now our whole entire workflow is changing because it's something better that we can get more performance, more fidelity. And we always joke around that we can make a coffee table book out of all the documents that we have, and it would make a loud thud. Definitely.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's a perfect. Yeah, no doubt. That's a perfect segue. I was looking for one into one of the questions that's coming from the audience here, which are very specific. So some talking about the changing of technology and Unreal Engine being the boss these days. Someone's asking, are you using either level instancing and or data layers in your VAD workflow? And I guess you could add to that world partition versus the old way of doing levels.
Right. We're finding level streaming has been the most stable way to go so far. So we're sticking to that for the foreseeable future. That said, we're constantly testing it 5.1, 5.2, just to see if any of those features have changed ever since. And if we need those features to change, just bugging Epic about it and having that direct line of contact with them to update those. But yeah, to your question, no world partitions at the moment. Level streaming has been the winner. I'm sorry, there was another part to that question.
Level instancing.
Level instancing.
Yeah, level instances. Yeah. Which do still work with level streaming.
Yeah, we do utilize some of those, but we utilize a lot of the packed level instances as well.
Right.
Just to convert things into instant static meshes, and just to cut down on performance and to clean up our scenes towards the end, so it's not wild.
They're great for file management.
Yeah,
optimizing and simplifying.
Exactly.
Very cool. I think that it was a good question. Definitely very specific. Another one is somebody's asking, can you describe the workflow for ingesting high poly lidar assets to make sure that they render correctly? And probably with that you could include photogrammetry. Yeah,
definitely. It scales. So yeah, for lidars, for example, high res lidars, we'll often decimate them a little bit before bringing them into the engine, down to like maybe 1 million triangles or so. However, recently Nanite has changed that for us. And we're finding that more and more. So yes, absolutely, the lidar scans do need to be processed still, but there's less of a reduction process and a decimation process. So poly count, we don't need to worry about so much anymore. That said, I would also
hard drive space.
hard drive space will it'll destroy you there. So sure, you have enough hard drive space before doing anything like that. What we're also finding that's interesting, that'll be worth exploring, is just Unreal's modeling tools and kind of utilizing those more and more to process your scans. We're finding it can handle quite a bit of geo, like 10 million triangles plus sometimes, and just decimating it in engine if you need to. So workflows like that may also work in the future too, or I mean, right now even. So with a little more testing.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, it's nice to be able to stay in the same space and not have to shift things between programs all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's great with like the occasional iPhone scan as well. If you need just something like really quick and brought into your engine, it used to be that you would need to scan something with your iPhone, process it through Blender or whatnot, before bringing it to the engine. But I believe it was the reality capture app. I'm not sure. I'll have to double check. But yeah, just the ability to scan something with your iPhone, bring it straight into Unreal with a bridge, and then you're good to go, potentially. So there are instances where that may work. More often than not, like at least at Pixo, I'm talking about more of like indie productions. We will go with a high def lidar scan. Reason being, for match move and VFX, its use will double. So we need to go with high res lidars for the most part here.
Makes sense.
Still in a pinch, it works. We did have an instance where there was a surprise prop on set that no one was told about. Our VFX soup took a reality capture of it on his phone, sent that file to Gmail, sent that, or not Gmail, but sent that to email, and to the studio, and then we processed that, put it on Reel, and sent it back like hours later, and they had it for the shoot. So it was really quick. It would have not been possible if we had to bring a whole lidar thing out there and process that.
Right, that's cool. Yeah, we did something similar the other day for a demo in NEB, where we had a Chinese lantern and did a quick phone scan of it, chucked it in the engine, and it was a little bit further back, and it did the job. There was like minutes into the engine, and it solved the trick.
Wild.
It's getting crazy now.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, it's and
there's some to keep up with.
Yeah, there's more questions coming in about where this is going as well. So people are asking about Nerfs. Are you guys exploring Nerfs?
Absolutely. So I can't speak too much about those, but I know for sure Pixo Innovation Labs is kind of a new component of Pixomondo, and they are dedicated, at least at the moment, to Nerfs and AI. So there's a big push to utilize those more in our workflow. I'm not saying I can't talk about it to violate any NDAs or anything. I just don't have that info right now.
It's too new. Brand new.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So I would love to play around with them at home at the soonest opportunity.
Seeing some of these things like obviously the concept art generators that we've seen a lot of in the last year or two, but now seeing more 3D and things like Wonder Studios, Wonder Dynamics coming up with this like auto visual effects studio in a box kind of thing that's got everyone fascinated and scared at the same time.
There'll always be fixes, though. I mean, I definitely,
there will always be little bits in
fixed.
behind the heads where it doesn't totally add up. But.
Exactly, you got to fill in the gaps. But I think all the AI and the whole Nerf technology is going to be pretty exciting for the future, and we'll start to see that, implemented more and more into virtual production. And I could see it starting off as like background and matte painting stuff, and then slowly working its way forward to like, hero environments or locations that you can go out and scan or Nerf, and then bring back and shoot on, and not have to, put anyone in danger.
Oh yeah.
It
It's an exciting
sounds like
time.
you guys are pro the advances in AI versus scared. There's a lot of fear out there, I
Right.
hear as well, around it taking our jobs and, you know, affecting
Sure.
things to that extent. Personally, I'm more of an optimist in that sense as well. But
Me
Yeah,
too. I think there's a component to it for sure. The whole copyright discussion. There's definitely something to be said there.
yeah,
However, in my mind too, though, it hasn't been so much about being optimistic versus pessimistic about it, so much as it's inevitable that
right.
it's coming out, and
Yeah,
all that we can really do is adopt it into our workflow and learn how to work with it as much as we can. Bow down to our AI overlords 500 years from now.
be
But,
nice to them. Yeah,
exactly.
adapt. But that's what we all do through our entire career as well. You
True.
know, we've adapted, you know, all the lengths of our careers. I mean, how much crazy software and things have come out that have expedited things, you know, and you would think, oh my God, am I gonna stay? But you stay up to date with it
Mhm.
when you're in the industry because you have to. And that's why I don't think our brains will ever grow old because
That's true.
we're always thinking, we always have something to learn. And now if,
Mhm.
you know, more now than ever, it's like there's too much to learn, but you got to really pick your course and you know what's going to be beneficial and passionate to you and what interests you. And I think everyone will be fine as long as they stick to that, stick to your interest
Yeah.
and just adapt.
Never stop learning.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great advice. And I had a point in the middle of my career where I started to feel the passion going, and I started thinking about
Mhm.
other careers. I'd already had one in software engineering. I didn't particularly want
Right.
another one, but I found that actually that dip in passion was because I wasn't growing, and I had this crazy push at the beginning to learn and get into the industry and all this kind of stuff, and I kept going for years, and then I wanted a little rest, and I rested a bit too much in a way, and my passion dropped. And I started thinking, what do I do? But then going back to learning again, going back to growing again, it really came back. And this new era of virtual production and real time and the amount of change there is there just took it into the stratosphere from there for me. And I think it's a very exciting time that we're in.
Definitely. It was
Definitely.
a big defibrillator for everybody in the industry.
Yeah.
I think we all
Yeah.
felt it.
Yeah. If you're not the biggest growth I've ever had is being uncomfortable. That's pretty much
Mhm.
it that I can equate. Whenever I'm comfortable, you know, things just fly by.
Oh
You're not
yeah,
really growing.
Time just
Yeah.
passes, yeah, and
exactly.
I had some good advice from a mentor once like that. It was something like that. It was that the quality of your life is related to how comfortable you can be with being uncomfortable. Essentially, you know, because being
I love
uncomfortable is
that.
where the growth is, and growth
Good advice.
is yeah, I think so too. Yeah, and it's good to remember that when you get stuck sometimes. Last question we got here from somebody saying, can you give us a walkthrough of what working in a collaborative VAD Unreal project environment is like? How edits, assets, and such are handled in groups? So, like I said, essentially, I guess it's collaborative. How does collaborative working work for you guys in VADs?
Definitely. So there's a distinction to be made too between collaboration on stage versus collaboration in the studio. Collaboration on stage, just like any other virtual production shoot you might encounter, it's a multi-user session at its core. So you're not quite saving changes and pushing and pulling files in the sense that you may be used to with something like Perforce or Source Control. You're in a live session and you have multiple people physically flying around in your game like a multiplayer game and making changes that way. So that's kind of how it works on stage. Of course, if there are content browser assets that you need to save, those need to be saved. But on the studio side, it comes down to a level streaming workflow, uh, fairly standard, just kind of checking out files as you need them and then having a back and forth that way. But that was a lot of the learning curve too for us coming from VFX is we're kind of used to the traditional assembly line approach with a little bit of a parallel work component to it. But in this scenario, you're really kind of in a sandbox, which is kind of the new aspect of it. And part of that is really just us communicating very clearly and regularly about, okay, hey, you got this file checked out. Can you check it in? I need to borrow it. Okay, you're going to use it for another 15 minutes. You got to finish this light bake. Cool. And then I'll pick it up then. Little things like that, just having that back and forth in our teams groups and kind of staying in lockstep with one another that way. That's really kind of been the solution to the whole sandbox learning curve that we've experienced. But yeah, it's come down to level streaming for the most part.
It's almost a good advantage of level streaming is it encourages more communication, which is a good thing for teams.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's been a huge help. It forces us to also kind of stay posted between our departments. I mean, it's all VAD, but like different components in VAD about which element is at what stage in the process. In visual effects, you're traditionally like going into shotgun and reviewing things in dailies. But over here, there's like a rapid fire. This change was made. That change was made. This change was made. A lot more like, kind of a game dev approach. You're pushing things to prod from essentially a dev stream. So yeah, it's been a huge help over there in just forcing us to communicate and let everyone know what we've changed and not step on each other's toes along the way. So it's been great in that sense.
If anyone's ever going to call it shot grid.
What did I say shotgun?
We're proud of you, Asad. Yes.
Thank you. It means it's a rite of passage.
You haven't converted yet.
So. Yeah. Not that new. Awesome. Yeah. Shotgun it is.
You've delivered something that long. It's hard to change how you see it. People still calling the Staples Center in LA. It's had another name for years already, but
I would still call it the Staples Center.
Yeah.
I don't even. Yeah.
You gotta listen to the people.
The people have spoken.
Yeah.
They give it the name they want. Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
Branding people is all great in theory.
Exactly.
Well, is there anything that you guys would like to share with our listeners? Anything, anywhere they could follow what you're doing, if your personal work, anything that you'd like to leave our audience with?
Absolutely. Definitely reach out to us on LinkedIn. We're always on the lookout. We're also super open on that platform too. So if you have any questions, feel free to send them over, and we'll do our best to get back to you as soon as we can. Zach, if you had anything.
Just always keep creating, never stop learning, and just remember with anything you see out there, you're only seeing the tip of the iceberg, not all of the ice that was beneath the water to get to break out of the surface. So wherever, whatever stage that you're at in your career, you're always going to grow, and you can always become a better artist than you were yesterday. And as Asad said, we're always open. We're on LinkedIn. Keep a lookout on our social media channels from Pixo, see what we're up to. And we got some exciting stuff to show in the future.
I know you guys are doing incredible work over there. I'm looking forward to seeing it. We had one last question that just sneaked in here. I'm gonna throw it into the mix. What does the traditional art department need to learn to work better with the VAD?
Oh, that's a great question. I think a lot of it is it's the vocabulary. B, the technology behind it and the whole optimization component of this is the biggest learning curve there. So the importance of locking down creative decisions early on in the process as much as possible is really something that we try to instill in every production, making that mental shift between this is not VFX and it's not an air date that we're trying to hit, it's a shoot date. So whatever creative decisions we would traditionally need to lock down for the art department to build a practical set, anything like that, it would need to be the same for a virtual build. similar limitations. Things need to be locked down in that sense. But beyond that, I think a lot of it, we both just kind of pick up having a back and forth throughout our projects. But optimization was a big one for us. It was a learning curve for us too. It's a learning curve for everybody. And in every production, it's kind of one of the hot topics that comes up, that like, why do we need to lock down creative decisions at this point? Comes down to optimization, making something run as a video game level on an LED stage. I don't know, Zach, if you had anything to add to that one.
That's pretty the most important one, and just giving us the time and knowing what we're able to create with them, and to offer and guarantee the best fidelity and performance that we can give for them to have in-camera finals. That's the most important thing.
Oh, actually, one last thing. Knowing when to use virtual production in your production in the first place is a big question to ask early on in the process. Things like scene length is if it's a one-off, maybe virtual production isn't the best option. Maybe you'd rather go for a longer sequence that would benefit the most from an idea of in-camera finals. So scene length, having a solid physical set, and locking down what elements would need to be interactive, dynamic, early stages. So things like that. Optimization above all. It usually comes down to that for us.
Right, which is essentially not an entirely new idea to visual effects who've been optimizing.
That's true.
Going back to early projects I worked on that took a week to render, and having to try and optimize them to make them render in several days rather than a week. You know, it's always been there, sort of. It's just not been as absolute as it is now. Now it's a requirement. You have to.
Yeah, exactly.
Make or break a shoot. That's for sure.
Absolutely. If it's not 24, then there's no shoot.
Yeah.
Right. Well, Zach, Asad, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on today. Thank you very much for your time and sharing your experience, your wisdom with our listeners.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having us.
It was a pleasure talking to you, Ed, and great questions, everyone.
Absolutely.
Really, really great questions.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks also to our audience. For asking great questions and for being here today and sharing your lunchtime with us or wherever you are in the world. So yeah, we'll be back in a couple of weeks with another episode. This has been episode 46. We're CG Pro. You can follow us at becomecgpro.com. And a big thanks again to our guests from Pixo. Big thanks to our listeners, and hope you all have a great week out there. Take care, everybody.